There are moments in congressional hearings that are genuinely confusing. Complex legal questions, murky jurisdictional disputes. This is not one of those moments. This is actually the simplest question imaginable. The kind of question a child could answer. Does a convicted sex offender deserve special treatment and privileges in prison?
Attorney General Bondi, I think you and pretty much everybody else here and throughout the country believes that convicted sex offenders don't deserve special treatment or privileges in prison.
Yes or no? That's it. That's the whole thing. A question so basic, so morally unambiguous that a fifth grader could answer it without blinking. And Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of the United States, couldn't answer it. She couldn't say no. She couldn't say yes. She couldn't say anything except, "Let me be crystal clear," followed by absolutely nothing.
Let me be crystal clear on this. And
Thank you.
Let me keep going. No, let me keep going.
Perfect. Well, I
did not know she was being transferred.
I asked you yes or no.
She was not transferred to a lower
Mr. Chairman.
level.
What we are about to watch is a congressional hearing where Representative Deborah Ross tries to get a straight answer about why Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's convicted co-conspirator, was transferred from federal prison to a minimum security camp she was legally ineligible for, given special privileges including private workouts and puppy time, and is now reportedly dangling cooperation in exchange for clemency from Donald Trump. And Bondi's defense? I learned after the fact. That's a question for the Bureau of Prisons. I was not involved in that at all. The Attorney General, the top law enforcement officer in the country, the person ultimately responsible for every federal prison, every inmate, every transfer, and she had no idea, or so she claims. Meanwhile, the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse are sitting in that room, watching, listening, waiting for someone to explain why the woman who helped destroy their lives is getting puppy therapy and club fed while they're still waiting for justice. Let's watch. I'll break it down for you.
Attorney General Bondi, I think you and pretty much everybody else here and throughout the country believes that convicted sex offenders don't deserve special treatment or privileges in prison. And yet Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's co-conspirator, received perk after perk in prison. In July, she had a 2-day interview with your deputy and President Trump's former defense attorney, Todd Blanche. Just days after that, Maxwell was transferred from a federal correctional institution in Florida to a minimum security camp in Texas, which she, as a sex offender, would normally be ineligible for. At this new facility, as the ranking member talked about, and by the way, it's nicknamed Club Fed, we've heard reports that she's been afforded special privileges: puppy time, private workouts, personal mail, secretarial services. Attorney General Bondi, does a convicted sex offender like Ghislaine Maxwell deserve special treatment and privileges in prison? Yes or no?
Let me be crystal clear on this. No. And
Thank you.
let me keep going. No, let me keep going.
Perfect. Well, I
did not know she was being transferred.
I asked you yes or no.
She was not transferred to a lower
Mr. Chairman,
level.
please stop the clock and remind the witness of the rules. One rule she needs to understand
I'm glad that we're agreeing. So when we're agreeing, we can move on to some other things. But I want you to know that every time she does get these perks, and it's been publicly reported, that the folks she's abused, the survivors who are sitting here, they see themselves as being denied justice. They feel re-traumatized. And I'm glad that we agree on that. But she should not be in that prison. And she needs to be moved back to a maximum security prison as soon as possible. But what she has told another committee here is that she won't cooperate with them unless she gets clemency from Donald Trump. It's just crazy to consider that she can be wielding this kind of influence within the administration. But that begs the question, who ordered her to be transferred to the minimum security prison that she was ineligible for? Who signed off on the special privileges? Was it Mr. Blanche? Was it one of your other subordinates? So please, can you tell us who sent her there, since you don't agree she should be there?
I said I do not agree she should receive special treatment. She was transferred, I learned after the fact, to the same level facility, and that is a question for the Bureau of Prisons. I was not involved in that at all. The same level facility, I don't know why, but you know, instead of talking about Ghislaine Maxwell, who hopefully will die in prison, you should be talking about Irina Zarutska.
I have a couple
who
of
died
other
on a
questions.
subway.
Right, and I absolutely...
You don't talk about that.
I have been talking about it and actually helping with these issues. But we're going to move back to you.
I bet we are.
Yes, of course, because you're here to testify. That's what the whole point of this endeavor is. So of course we're moving back to you. It is all about you. So as we've heard, she took the fifth in response to every single question in that committee hearing. And her lawyer dangled the offer of clemency. Should Donald Trump pardon or commute her sentence? Should she be released from prison, yes or no? You said you hope she dies there, so I'm hoping the answer is no.
I already answered that question.
Good. I'm very glad. I really like this bipartisan agreement about
when
what
it
should
agrees
happen
with
with
you.
her.
But you
Yes.
don't want to talk about Irina Zarutska. You don't want to talk about
I talk about her
murdered
all
by
the
a
time,
violent crime
but
offender
I am not
in
here
your
to
jurisdiction.
testify before Congress. You are. That is your job today.
You're
That's what you're getting paid for.
obsessed with attack.
Time belongs-
So
Time belongs to
I
the
want you to know that your own DOJ employee, he's recently been demoted and had some other problems, advises on pardons. Do you think he will be advising Mr. Trump on any kind of clemency or pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell?
I'm not going to speculate, and you couldn't even identify properly. That's why you don't want to talk about Irina Zarutska. You couldn't properly identify her relative.
I absolutely
It's embarrassing.
have been, and her family, by the way, appreciates all of the condolences, all of the help, everything that our law enforcement in North Carolina has been doing to help her family. Her family feels well treated. Thank you, and I yield back.
Young lady yields back.
There is so much to unpack here that I almost don't know where to start, but let's begin with the most obvious thing. Deborah Ross asked Pam Bondi a yes or no question. Does a convicted sex offender like Ghislaine Maxwell deserve special treatment and privileges in prison? That is not a trick question. That is not a legal gray area. That is the simplest possible inquiry you can make of the person who runs the federal prison system. Bondi started with, "Let me be crystal clear," which is always the warning sign that someone is about to be anything but clear. She said no, which was the right answer, but she couldn't stop there. She had to keep going. And in doing so, she revealed that she didn't know her own department had transferred a high-profile sex offender to a facility she was legally ineligible for. Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's right hand, convicted of sex trafficking minors, sentenced to 20 years. And the Attorney General of the United States had no idea she'd been moved to a minimum security camp with puppy therapy and private workouts. Either Bondi is telling the truth, in which case she is spectacularly uninformed about what her own Bureau of Prisons is doing with one of the most notorious inmates in the federal system, or she's lying, in which case she's covering for whoever ordered the transfer. Neither option inspires confidence that the Department of Justice is being run competently or honestly. Here's the thing that really gets me. Bondi keeps trying to change the subject to Irina Zarutska, a woman who was murdered on a New York subway. That's a tragedy. That's a terrible thing that happened to an innocent person. But it has literally nothing to do with the question Ross is asking. It has nothing to do with Ghislaine Maxwell's special privileges. It has nothing to do with who authorized the transfer. It has nothing to do with whether Donald Trump might pardon her. It is a complete non sequitur, a desperate attempt to pivot away from a question Bondi cannot answer because the answer implicates her boss. Ross catches it immediately. She doesn't take the bait. She just says, "You're here to testify, that's your job today. and brings it right back to Maxwell. That is how you conduct oversight. You don't let them change the subject. You keep asking until you get an answer, or until it becomes obvious they're not going to give one. And in this case, it became obvious very quickly that Bondi was never going to answer. She never said who ordered the transfer. She never said whether Todd Blanche was involved. She never said whether the DOJ employee advising on pardons would be consulted about Maxwell. She just kept deflecting. Which brings us to the clemency question. Ross asks, should Donald Trump pardon or commute her sentence? Should she be released from prison? Bondi says, I already answered that question. But she didn't. She said she hopes Maxwell dies in prison, which is not the same as saying Trump won't pardon her. Hoping someone dies in prison is a sentiment. Promising that the president won't interfere with her sentence is a commitment. And Bondi won't make that commitment. She won't say the words, no, Donald Trump will not pardon Ghislaine Maxwell. She won't say it because she can't. Because she doesn't know. Because maybe it's already been discussed. Maybe that's why Maxwell's lawyer is dangling cooperation in exchange for clemency. Maybe that's why she got transferred to Club Fed. Maybe that's why she's getting special treatment. Maybe it's all connected. And the survivors sitting in that room, the women who were children when Maxwell destroyed their lives, they know it. They can feel it. They can see the system working exactly the way it always works for powerful people and their friends. The irony here is almost too painful to articulate. The Department of Justice spent months trying to indict Tish James for nothing. They forced out prosecutors who wouldn't play ball. They went to 2 grand juries in 2 courts in the same week. They wasted enormous resources trying to punish someone for the crime of holding Donald Trump accountable. But for Ghislaine Maxwell, for the woman who helped Jeffrey Epstein traffic children, suddenly they're hands off. Suddenly it's a question for the Bureau of Prisons. Suddenly, the Attorney General has no idea what's happening. You don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to connect these dots. You just have to be paying attention. This is a convicted sex trafficker getting special treatment from a Justice Department that answers to the president, whose former defense attorney just happened to spend 2 days interviewing her right before she got moved to a better prison with better privileges and a shot at clemency. That is not justice. That is how the system works when it's broken. When it serves the powerful instead of the powerless. The survivors know it. They feel it. They sit in those hearings year after year, watching the names of their abusers get redacted while their own names get leaked, watching the people who destroyed their lives get transferred to better facilities while they're still waiting for someone to be held accountable. Ross asked the right questions. She did her job. But at the end of the day, she still didn't get an answer. Because Pam Bondi wouldn't give one. Because Pam Bondi can't give one. Because the answer would implicate people too powerful to implicate. And so the hearing ends the way it began, with a question hanging in the air, with survivors wondering if justice will ever come, with the rest of us left to connect the dots ourselves.